The house was empty when Marcus Webb came home that Tuesday. Not empty like she'd gone out. Empty like furniture was gone. Like the photographs had been taken from the walls and the specific warmth that a family home has. The accumulated temperature of years of ordinary life had been removed along with everything else. There was a note on the kitchen counter. It said, "I know. My attorney will be in touch." Marcus stood in the kitchen for a long time. He did not know what she knew. He had not done anything. He had 12 years of being a father to a boy named Tyler. 12 years of school pickups and weekend soccer and bedtime routines, and the particular love of a man who had watched his son grow from a newborn into a person with opinions and jokes, and a way of tilting his head when he was thinking that was identical to the way Marcus tilted his. He had done nothing wrong. He had no idea what the note meant. What he did not know yet, what he would not find out for 4 more months, was that his wife had ordered a DNA test on their son 6 weeks ago. And he would not find out for 4 more months after that. 8 months total. 8 months of his life being dismantled, that the lab had switched the samples, and that everything that was about to happen to him was built on a mistake. Please like this video. Those likes matter so much for stories like this. Hit the button. Subscribe too, it's free. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Now let me take you back 6 weeks before that note. Marcus Webb was 41 years old and had been married to his wife, Sandra, for 14 years. He ran a small landscaping and outdoor design company. 15 employees, a solid reputation in the area, work he had built from one van and a client list that fit on a single piece of paper. He was not wealthy in the dramatic sense, but he had built something real, and he was proud of it in the quiet way of people who built things without needing anyone else to notice. He was a father in the way that some men are fathers, not because they were required to be, but because it was the most important thing they were. Tyler was 12. He had Marcus's habits and Sandra's quickness and a combination of stubbornness and warmth that made other parents routinely describe him as one of the good ones. Marcus coached Tyler's soccer team on Saturdays. He had done this for 4 years. He had not missed a single Saturday. Sandra Webb was 39 and had been, in most visible respects, a good partner for 14 years. In the year before the note, something had shifted. Marcus had felt it without being able to name it. A quality of assessment in her attention when they were together, as if she was measuring something. Questions that arrived with more weight than their surface implied. A distance in moments that should have been close. He had attributed it to stress. Her mother had been unwell. Work had been difficult. Marriage is not always the same temperature. He had not attributed it to anything that would have led him to the truth. Sandra had, 6 weeks before the note, ordered a home DNA paternity kit. She had done this because of something her sister, Linda, had said at a family dinner. Linda had too much wine and said something about Tyler's eyes, and said he didn't look like Marcus, and it was meant as nothing. The throwaway observation of someone who hadn't thought before speaking. Sandra had not been able to stop thinking about it. She had not asked Marcus. She had ordered the kit instead. The test had come back 4 weeks before the note. It said, probability of paternity, 0. 0%. Sandra had sat in her car in a parking lot for 2 hours. Then she had called Linda. Then she had called her mother. Then she had called an attorney. She had not called Marcus. She had not asked Marcus. She had not considered the possibility that the result was wrong. The divorce filing arrived 11 days after the note. Marcus stood in his office, the small one at the back of the yard depot, and read the filing and tried to locate himself in a situation he did not recognize. He called Sandra. She did not answer. He called her mother. Her mother said, "Marcus, I think you need to speak with an attorney." He said, "Will someone please tell me what is happening?" Sandra's mother said, "Sandra will explain when she's ready." She hung up. He hired an attorney that afternoon, a woman named Patricia Cole, who had 20 years in family law and who received Marcus's account with the specific patience of someone who had heard many versions of a situation like this, but understood that each one was distinct. He said, "I don't know what she thinks I did." Patricia said, "She hasn't told your attorney either. The filing just cites irreconcilable differences." He said, "That's not a reason." Patricia said, "It doesn't have to be legally." He said, "I need to know what she thinks." Patricia said, "I'll make contact with her attorney." The contact produced nothing specific for 2 weeks. Then Sandra's attorney sent a single additional document, a copy of the DNA test result. Patricia called Marcus. She said, "Have you seen this?" He said, "No." "What is it?" she told him. He said nothing for a long moment. He said, "That's wrong." Patricia said, "Marcus." He said, "That is factually wrong. Tyler is my son." Patricia said, "I understand, but the result is what she acted on." He said, "She didn't ask me." Patricia said, "No, she didn't." He said, "She destroyed our family and she didn't ask me." Patricia said, "I know." The custody arrangement in the interim period gave Sandra primary residence with Tyler. Marcus had weekends. Tyler was 12 and had been told that his parents were separating, and had been told in the specific gentle way of parents managing a child's world, and had cried and then asked practical questions and then been quiet for a week. On the first weekend with Marcus, Tyler sat at the kitchen counter of Marcus's new apartment, rented, modest, the furniture practical and temporary, and said, what Ash looked at his son. He said, something complicated, I'm going to fix it. Tyler said. Is it about me? Marcus said. None of what's happening is your fault. Tyler said, that's not what I asked. Marcus looked at his 12-year-old. He said, yes, but not in the way you're thinking, and I need you to trust me that I'm going to sort it out. Tyler said, okay. He meant it. That trust, the specific trust of a 12-year-old who has decided to believe his father, was the thing Marcus carried for the next 4 months. In the third month, Marcus's attorney filed for an independent court-ordered DNA test. Sandra's attorney objected, not to the test itself, but to the timing, the process, the specific protocol requested. The objections were procedural and eventually unsuccessful. The court ordered the test. The test was conducted through a different laboratory, an accredited forensic lab used for legal proceedings, with chain of custody documentation that could not be questioned. Marcus sat with the results for the time it took him to read them. Then he called Patricia. He said, I'm his father. Patricia said, I know. I have the results here too. He said the first test was wrong. She said the first test was a home kit processed through a consumer lab. Consumer labs operate at a different standard than forensic labs. Sample contamination, handling errors, processing errors, these happen. He said, what does this mean now? She said, it means the basis for everything that happened in the past 3 months was incorrect. That has significant legal implications. He said, I want Tyler home. Patricia said, let's get to work. Please like this video. Those likes mean everything. Subscribe if you haven't, free. Drop a comment. Where in the world are you watching from right now? Now let me tell you what happened when the truth came out. The attorney Patricia retained for the DNA liability case found what she was looking for in 6 weeks. The consumer lab that had processed Sandra's home kit had experienced a sample handling incident in the relevant processing window, a contamination event that had affected multiple samples and had produced incorrect results for at least 3 families, including Marcus's. The lab had known about the incident. They had not disclosed it proactively to the affected families. They had issued a quiet notice to a regulatory body. The notice had not reached Sandra. Marcus's attorney filed a formal complaint and a civil action against the lab simultaneously. The civil action produced, as civil actions sometimes do, a willingness to provide documentation and a public statement that the lab had not previously offered. The statement confirmed the error. It confirmed that the sample processed as Tyler Webb's had produced a result corresponding to a different family's DNA profile. It confirmed that Marcus Webb was not the person the test implicated. Patricia sent the documentation to Sandra's attorney on a Tuesday. Sandra's attorney called Sandra that afternoon. The conversation Sandra had with the documentation took place alone in her house, the house she had rebuilt her life in for 4 months, surrounded by the decisions she had made with absolute certainty. She called her sister Linda. Linda said, "Oh God." Sandra said nothing. Linda said, "Sandra." Sandra said, "I destroyed our family." There was nothing Linda could say to that. The family hearing was attended by both attorneys, a mediator, and a judge who had been managing the case. Marcus sat on one side. Sandra sat on the other. The documentation was presented. The judge reviewed it. He said, in the specific measured language of someone who understands that what they say will stay with the people in the room for the rest of their lives. The original DNA test result that formed the basis for the petitioner's filing has been confirmed as erroneous, arising from a laboratory processing error. The correct biological paternity has been established through court-ordered forensic testing. Mr. Webb is Tyler's biological father. He looked at both parties. He said the custody arrangement will now reflect this determination. Sandra sat in the courtroom and looked at the table. Marcus sat in the courtroom and looked at the judge. He did not look at Sandra. Marcus's attorney filed a formal request for primary custody based on the disruption to the child's relationship with his father during the preceding months, the original error that had caused it, and Tyler's expressed preferences, which the mediator had assessed at appropriate length. The judge granted primary custody to Marcus with generous visitation for Sandra. Marcus drove to Sandra's house after the hearing to pick up Tyler for the first time as primary custodian. Tyler came out with his bag. He got in the car. He said, "You fixed it." Marcus said, "Yes." Tyler said, "I knew you would." Marcus said nothing. He drove. The civil action against the laboratory was settled out of court. The terms were not public, but were reported by the local press, which had picked up the story through court documents as significant. The lab issued a formal apology that was not the same as a meaningful apology, but was the only one that the legal process could compel. The families affected by the processing incident, 3 in total, each received settlements. Marcus used his settlement for 2 things. The first was Tyler's college fund. The second was the expansion of web landscaping and outdoor design, which had spent 8 months running on reduced capacity, while its owner had been otherwise occupied. The expansion was the thing Marcus went back to with the specific energy of someone who has had everything else stripped away and discovered that the work is what remains. He hired 2 additional project managers. He took on a commercial contract he had been declining for 2 years because the scale had seemed too large. He updated the equipment. In the first year after the hearing, web landscaping grew 40%. In the second year, it grew again, not because of the settlement capital, because Marcus had stopped being the person who managed what he had. He had become, through the previous year and a half, the person who built what he wanted. There is a difference, and it costs a great deal to learn it. Sandra had a different year, not a punitive one. Life is not a justice system, and consequence is not always proportionate or even visible. She had a year of living with what she had done and what she had not done. She had not asked. That was the thing she came back to in her own accounting. She had held a piece of paper that told her something, and she had treated it as truth, and she had dismantled 14 years without once asking the person she had built them with. She went to therapy. This is not a small thing. It is, in fact, the right thing and the hard thing and the thing that costs more than most people acknowledge. She worked. She maintained the relationship with Tyler that the custody arrangement allowed, and she was good in that relationship, present, attentive, working to be the parent she needed to be rather than the parent she had been. Tyler was 12 and then 13 and then 14. He was not bitter. He was not cold. He was the boy Marcus had raised, quick and stubborn and warm, and he loved his mother because she was his mother, and he loved his father because his father had coached his soccer team every Saturday for 4 years and had told him the truth and had kept his word. He grew up. Marcus kept coaching the Saturday soccer team. Not Tyler's team. Tyler had aged out of that league, a younger group now. Parents on the sideline who knew Marcus as the coach, not as the man who had spent 8 months in a custody proceeding, not as the man who had stood in an empty house reading a note that said, "I know," just the coach. He liked that. He liked being, in that context, simply the person doing the work in front of him. His company had grown into something he had not originally planned for, not just landscaping, but landscape design, commercial outdoor environments, the kind of work that required an architect's eye alongside a contractor's hands. He had hired people who had those things. He had built something that worked. Tyler turned 16 and started working Saturdays at the company during summers. He was not an outdoor person by nature. He was going to be something with numbers or code, Marcus suspected. But he came anyway, on Saturdays, and loaded equipment and handed tools and watched how the business worked. Marcus watched him watch it. He thought about the note on the kitchen counter, the empty walls, the 14 months between that Tuesday and the day he drove Tyler away from the custody hearing. He thought about what it cost and what it produced. Tyler, on one of the Saturdays, said, "Why do you still coach the little kids' team?" Marcus said, "Because someone has to, and I'm good at it." Tyler said, "Is that the only reason?" Marcus said, "No." Tyler waited. Marcus, "'Cause I know what it means when someone shows up every Saturday. I know what that's worth." Tyler looked at his father. He said, "Yeah." He went back to what he was doing. It was enough. "Here is the question I cannot answer for you and that I want you to sit with. If Sandra had asked Marcus about the test, and he had said he was absolutely certain Tyler was his, would you have believed him? Or would you have done what Sandra did? And is the fact that the test was wrong a reason to forgive her? Or does it not change what the choice reveals about how she saw him? Drop your answer in the comments. Real ones only. And tell me where you're watching from. Please like this video. Hit that button. It makes such a difference for stories like this to reach people. Subscribe if you haven't, free. Share it with someone who needs to hear this today. See you in the next